Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you what I recommend to play against e4, e5 from black. e4, e5, and having played against this many times myself as the white player, I find that the Roy Lopez is actually, it is the most popular line to play against e4, e5, and it's the way I like to play against e5, having tried things like Scotch Gambit, the Scotch game. I even tried the Ponziani, where he plays moves like c3 and then tried d4. And I just think that the Roy Lopez deserves its popularity because it's such a great opening. It's after knight f3, white's attacking the pawn on e5, and okay, so knight c6, bishop b5, we reach the Roy Lopez. But first I'm going to show what to do quickly against knight f6. So this is the Petrov. And what black does, this is very popular by players, Kramnik plays this a lot, and it tends to be a very solid option for black, and a great option if black's wanting to try to draw the game. So here, both central pawns are attacked. White takes, now d6. Notice that after knight takes e4, white can play queen e2, where he's lining up and attacking against the king, and now knight f6 would be losing here because it's a knight c6 check, and white's winning the queen. So black doesn't want to take on e4 first, he needs to play d6. And after knight f3, knight takes e4. Now there's a couple of ways white can play here. You can play with d4, which is the main line, and black responds with d5, and then we see that it's a very sort of balanced and symmetrical position. The way I really like to play against the Petrov is knight c3, and now this creates imbalances in the game. And black normally always responds with knight takes c3. Knight f6 is another move, but I don't think it's as good because here black has the chance to actually take and not waste a tempo by retreating, but also double white's pawns on the c file, which actually I don't mind for white because it means the bishop is allowed to come out straight away. And white wants to castle queenside, so the double pawn can actually help defend the white king. And also, when white wants to castle queenside, black wants to play something like bishop e7, bishop f6, where the bishop sits on quite a nice diagonal, facing towards the king. So knight f6 doesn't really make too much sense. Here you can just play something like d4, and after bishop e7, just go bishop d3, bishop g4. Or say they castle, you can play h3, and the idea is play g4. And I actually played this line in one of my games. I think it's my first round game. Yeah, it was my first round game. First round game in the World Youth Chess Championships in Brazil. And my opponent played this knight retreat move, and I played this h3 line. I think he played bishop g4 here. Can't remember, but I'll have those games up on the channel soon, so you can take a look. But if they play bishop g4, you can play h3, bishop h5, bishop f4. Now if the castle's g4, bishop g6, you take, queen d3, and I really like this line for white. You can castle queenside. You can even play d5 to gain space, and these pawns are going to be really helpful to marching them against black's king. Try opening up the h file, and here white has a huge space advantage. This knight hasn't really got much places to go. If he drops back to d7 to try allow his bishop to come out, the knight's not really going anywhere, so we can just castle, stick our rooks on this e file, and attack the bishop. So this is a good line for white. against his knight f6 line. And if they take on c3, this is what you'll probably get most of the time, we take back with the d pawn, bishop e7, bishop e3, castles. But you can also play bishop f4 here. It depends, you know, it depends which one you prefer. I tend to just play bishop e3, castles, queen d2, knight c6, castles. So just simple developing moves, bishop e6, king b1, protecting the a2 pawn, and also just getting the king out of any future checks, say on this g file. Knight e5, knight d4, attacking the bishop e6, bishop c4, and white tends to get a pretty nice position. You can place moves like either f3 and then g4, h4, or you can play with h3 and then g4 and f4, and start launching a really nice attack against the black king. And this pawn actually tends to help defend white's, the double pawn tends to help defend white's king's position here. Another way the black could play is, instead of going knight e5, you might try gain space on the queen side, a5, and here we can play moves like bishop d3, instead of a4, h4, a3, b3, b3. So black's got his pawn right down to a3. So now when he plays bishop f6, he's got a really nice diagonal here. And all he needs to do is try to get queen on this diagonal, and these possibilities of mating on b2. But this is okay for white, and then we can start playing moves like knight g5 and attack this bishop, attack the h7 pawn, the bishop coming in, the queen goes to e2 and over to h5, and this is actually very dangerous for black. If black plays something like h6, we can actually just ignore this threat of taking here, because say we allow black to take here, so let's just play something like rook d1. Obviously we wouldn't play this is not really doing much, but just to give an example, takes, and that's it, bishop, whenever the bishop moves, we're going to check in here, and now black's in a lot of trouble. We can always come back with any checks this way and try to pick up any loose pieces, or we can just try to get our queen over to the h file and mate to black. So obviously in hindsight we're going to want to try help that, so maybe queen e2 might be a good move here, although it might leave this pawn weak. So I think we can afford to give that pawn away. Or we can even play a move like f4. I don't like this move so much. It's okay, but well, I don't know, maybe f4, let's try f4. Because there's another reason to playing f4, I want to play something like g3, and if the h file ever gets opened I can play queen h2 and then mate on the h file. So to give you an example, now if they take, I can take bishop e7, and now I can even just go f5 first. So now the bishop has to retreat, and g4, and now the queen's coming over to h2, and now I'm going to end up mating black on h7. If they try something like f6, trying to skip the king, we can just go to like g6, and bishop c4 check, and well, black's in a lot of trouble here. So this is the line I recommend against a Petrov. You get a really nice aggressive position, and not only this boring d4 stuff when the position's really symmetrical and it's hard to actually win. So okay, let's go into knight c6, and now we have the royal pairs after bishop b5. Now black has a couple of ways he can play here. He can play systems where he does this g6 and like g7 stuff, or it's things like f5 straight away here, or there is knight f6, the Berlin defense. The knight g7 is known as the Kozio defense. There's d6, which is the old Steins. f5 is a Schielmann Skielman, however you say that. There's A6, which is the main line, and yeah, there's a couple of ways that Black can play. So you can play something like Bishop C5 here as well, which is the Cordell defense. So yeah, there's a lot to look at. So I guess if you do want to play Broiler pairs, there is a lot of theory you've got to learn. So do bear that in mind. But a lot of the A6 stuff is very similar. It makes it a lot easier to remember. You just play Bishop A4, and then the plan is very similar. Every single line you castle, C3, D4. The rook will come to E file. The bishop tends to drop back to C2. Your knight will come to D2, to F1 to G3. And this is pretty much the same in every single line. So that does help a little bit. He's got to know what to do against moves like, say, F5 straight away here. Because obviously your same plan's not going to work. So here I recommend you play knight C3, defending the pawn. Knight takes, knight F6, queen E2, knight to D5, you can take on F6, check, G takes F6, D4. So we're putting a lot of pressure on the C5 pawn. Bishop G7. If they go like E4 here, then we can play something like C4 and really attack the D5 pawn. And Black doesn't have enough time to play C6 to keep his nice pawn chain. So this could be annoying for him. And if they play Bishop G7, we can take, and then Black tends to just castle here. If pawn takes, then we can actually just take on E5, winning a pawn because of the pin against the king, and also threatening a discover check against the king. And yes, this is not good for Black. Black's actually in a lot of trouble now. So Black deliberately does this and to sacrifice a pawn and castles here. And if we take an F6, Black's getting a lot of counterplay. You can play moves like rook E8, then Bishop E3. So they'll probably have to take an F6 first. And now if we castle, for example, then Bishop G4. So we're looking very dangerous, pinning our knight, and it's going to force double pawns on F3, and our king's going to be wide open, and already Black's threatening to play knight D4 as well with this pin, and yeah, White can get in a lot of trouble really quickly here. So don't take and be greedy. Just take on C6. If you take C6, now you can play E6. So with this gives Black and white pawn structure. This F6 pawn also blocks this bishop in. Rook E8, and now this pawn's going to be lost here, and so we can just castle. And then Black doesn't tend to take. They tend to play C5 first, and then so that Queen B5 attacking the C5 pawn. Bishop F8, Bishop E3. So continually attacking this pawn, and then Rook takes E6. You can just play something like Rook F to D1, C6, Queen A4. You just play something like this basically. And if they go D4 here, then you can just put one of the rooks, whichever one you want, to D file, and then challenge with C3. This pin against the queen. Okay, let's go back. Probably cover all the other variations quickly, like the sideline variations. So G6, and so it's going to play C3, D6, D4. This is how what it's going to play is this one. So after Rook D1, we've got quite a nice space advantage. We're pinned against the queen. We want to develop a bishop over to G5, and White's doing pretty well after something like Queen C8, because This move looks a little strange, but it's not really looking at anything. Normally this is quite good when the pawn's on g3 and there's a bishop on g2, so the bishop can come all the way down to h3 and attack the fianchetted bishop, but here it doesn't make much sense. Okay, so bishop e3, so we could also go to bishop e3 and then now bishop c5. Castles, bishop c5, threatening to take, and then take, or take the rook. Rook d8, and white gets a really nice position. You can put your knight out on a3 and then into c4, or you can go knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, or knight into e3. The great thing about the royal pairs is white's position is always really flexible, so you have a lot of move options for your pieces. Okay, so let's go all the way back, and this time let's look at d6, the old Stein's defense. And here we can play d4, bishop d7, knight c3, knight f6, castle, bishop e7, take on c6, bishop takes c6, queen d3, so protecting e4 pawn, takes, knight takes, bishop goes back, b3, so we're going to fianchet our bishop this way and look towards the castled king. Castles, bishop b2, c6, and I quite like white's position here. These bishops are pretty blocked in. This pawn's pretty, it's blocking these bishops in, and black's got a really passive position. This knight can't really go anywhere. I can go to g4, I guess. Put on g4 and then to e5. As soon as it goes to g4, we can just play something like f4. Something like just f4 and then h3 to kick the knight away. And eventually we're going to want to play something like c4, just to really control this square. This rook's going to come to this file, this rook to that file, and we're going to have a really nice position. So going back, knight d4 is also an interesting option for black. This is called the bird's defense. Here we just take, castles, bishop c5, c3. It's important to break up this pawn, because often you can block your bishop in. Well, if you go d3, then this bishop becomes really offside. It gets stuck over here, and it can't do anything. And often it just becomes very easy to attack with c6 and d5 and things. And yeah, you don't want to do this. You want to go c3 first. And now after c6, bishop a4, knight e7, d3, d5, knight d2. Moves like knight b3 and try to win this pawn, or knight f3. Bishop b6, c takes, bishop takes, king h1. Preparing f4, castles, and here we can just go f4. Now we're going to go follow up with knight f3, and this bishop can either drop back to b3 or to c2, looking at either the f7 square or the h7 square. So also white gets a nice position here too. So the move we to cover is knight g7, so cozy defense. Castles, g6, c3, bishop g7, d4. So notice in all these royal pairs lines, white's castling king side, playing c3 and d4. He really wants to control the centre. His knight often comes to d2, to f1, to g3. Rook always comes to e1 or d1, and it's very simple to play if you just know the common ideas you're supposed to be going for. So takes, d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5. Go on check, bishop e6, knight, bishop g5, and that's queen d6, we can go knight d2. Right, to come to either c4 or knight e4, and after black turns to castle here, and now white can continue with either knight e4, knight c4, bring rook to c1 to add pressure to c6, and he can even drop his bishop back to h4 and then to g3, put pressure on the queen and on c7. So I'd say white's a lot better here. I'd continue with, thinking about going knight e4 and then knight into c5. knight e4 might be able to play queen b4, which could be annoying. Which, no, I don't know. Maybe it's not that bad. I'll think of rook c1 first. There's a lot of really nice moves that white can play here. Let's move up here to knight e4 one. Because now black really has to play queen b4. If he goes back with queen d7 and knight to c5 is really effective. And something like queen c8 and we can just take and just increase pressure on c file. And if they say play rook b8, we go b3, and yeah, black's in a lot of trouble threatening to just take on e6 and take on c6. So queen has to go to b4, and now we take, and then the line I was looking at is just knight c5 immediately here, attacking e6, but we might just be able to play b3 first. Now rook c1, knight c5, and we have a great outpost for our knight on c5. So all these variations look really nice to white. So another variation is bishop c5, now c3. So it's pretty straightforward. We're going to go play for d4, f5, d4, f takes e4. We can take on c6, d takes c6, knight f d2. So now we are threatening a nice queen h5 check, and there's a trap here. Well, black plays bishop d6. Bishop d6 is the best move, but if black was to take on d4, then we can play queen to h5 check, and we are winning the bishop on c5. So this is actually winning for white. So black does have to be careful of that, and after bishop d6 we take on e5, and there's a similar trick. Once again, if black takes on e5 we have queen h5 check, and we win the bishop on e5. So after takes, black plays e3, we can take on e3, bishop now goes to c5. Once again they can't take this poison pawn, queen h5 check, bishop c5, castles. So we just give back the pawn. Because after bishop takes e3 check, we just get king h1, and I'd actually say white's very close to winning here. Immediately we're threatening queen f3, attacking the bishop and threatening checkmate, and because of the lack of development that black has from constantly moving this bishop around, he's in a lot of trouble. His rook's got an open file, and it's going to be very hard for black to actually get the king out the centre. But yeah, definitely do not swap queens. So do not move this knight and lamb to swap queens, because that will reduce the pressure. But yeah, queen f3 next move here, and it's black's looking in a lot of trouble. So the other one we need to cover before we go into the main line is knight f6, and this is pretty common as well. This is like Petrov. It can be pretty drawish if you castle. Castles, it allows them to take d4, knight d6, attacking the bishop, and then loads of things get swapped off, and then after knight f5, queen takes, king takes, and then play tends to continue like something like this, and it's very the Berlin defense is studied by a lot of top grandmasters to see exactly what is the best way to continue after king takes d8 here. A lot of people have tried b3 and bishop b2, or just all sorts of things. If you do want to play like this for white, you don't mind having a pretty equal position, then this is the way I'd recommend playing. Personally, I don't like playing against the Berlin defense and swap everything off. So if you don't want to swap things off and against knight f6, you can just play d3 instead, and then play would continue like a6. Yeah, but I have to play d6 first, because otherwise they're threatening, otherwise we could win a pawn. So okay, so d6, we just get castle, a6, something like this, bishop e7, c3, castle, e1, so preparing d4. Then I'll play knight f5, attacking the bishop, and then something like c5. And it's always good to play h3 before you go d4. h3 stops any bishop g4 ideas. And now we're ready to play c4, d4 next move. We can play knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, and yeah, we still keep all the pieces on the board. So this is the way I'd recommend playing against a burn defensive if you do prefer to play out a middle game rather than go straight into like an ending sort of position. Okay, so I briefly covered all those lines, and now it is time to go on to a6, the main move here. And now there's two moves. You can take on c6, the exchange variation, but I do recommend just playing bishop a4. And now there's a couple ways black can continue here. You'll get knight f6 most of the time, castles b5. You can also get bishop c5 here, or bishop e7, or knight takes e4. Knight takes e4. This is not the same as the Berlin, because now to d4, there's no knight d6 attacking the bishop. So b5, bishop b3, d5 takes bishop e6. Note that we're attacking this pawn on d5, so bishop e6. Knight d2, knight c5, c3, d4 takes, knight takes, c takes a4, bishop c5, knight e4, bishop b6, knight fg5 takes, bishop takes g5, queen d7, rook e1, and now castles. So white gets a pretty nice position here. We already have a lot of pieces to attack, already ready to attack black's king. We need to try to get our queen over to g3. Somehow this knight on d4 is pretty strong for black, and black's strongest piece. So best way to get your queen over to g3 would be, you can go queen d3 and queen g3, or you can, instead of playing queen g3, you can just go for queen h5. Still looking to, we want to try sack on f6. So maybe queen h5 is not such a bad idea, as long as this knight, any of these knight forks aren't working. Because then knight c2, I guess we can play rook d1, hitting the queen, and move the other rook. So queen h5, and then my idea is just going to go rook e3 and rook g3. Should I probably put as rook a3, rook g3. Okay, so say black does nothing here. Say it's placing like c6. I don't know. Well, obviously c6 is a stupid move, but I'm just trying to show you my plan. Because say if rook a3 is, we can allow knight c2, rook g3, take on e1, and this is why I let them take on e1 and not a1. It's because after take on e1, there's no back rank with check. The knight's always going to be in the way. The queen does cover the square, but it's just a precaution. And now we can already play moves like knight f6 check, and white's won here. King moves, we have queen takes h7 mate, so pawn has to take, the bishop takes f6 check, and then queen has to block, and so we have checkmate. So this is the plan I'd look to do, just lift the rook. Obviously c6 is not a good move for black. They'll probably want to play something like rook e8, attack pawn on f4. And I would probably play, I don't think knight f6 check is quite working yet. You try this and then takes, bishop takes, with the idea of checkmate. g5 is queen f5. And yeah, I think black's just about surviving. So first, what you could do is just play bishop f6 instead. Because there's no takes of f6 because it's checkmate, and also winning the queen. So after bishop f6, we protect the pawn, and now we are threatening to go rook a3, rook g3, and we have a big attack on black's king. So that's what I'd play against the open. That's the close Roy Lopez. That's when they take on e4. Okay, so another line they can play is b5. bishop b3, and bishop b7 is the archangel variation. Against this we just go rook e1, bishop c5, c3, d6, d4. Notice we'd have to play h3 now because there's no bishop g4 move, so we can just go straight with d4, bishop e6, bishop e3, castles, knight bd2, h6. h6 is stopping our bishop going from g5, and now we want to play h3, stopping any knights coming to g4, attacking our bishop. Rook b8, and white gets a pretty solid position here. You can play bishop c2 to reinforce the pawn on e4, and then bring his knight around to g3 and start attacking black's king. A really nice way. The way I attack normally in a Royal Lopez is with g4. I really like playing g4 in Royal Lopez and then putting my knight on g3, just because it gives me more firepower. So I don't mind opening up my king, but I know it depends. Especially when both kings have castled the same way, I love just to push my pawns forward. So it depends if you like doing this. It's actually pretty safe. It's hard for black to break through. So I would actually go for this g4 stuff. Instead of the archangel, black can also play the chagrin, d6, c3, and once again white's going to have the same plan. So there's no knight takes e4 here because of bishop d5 when they want the knights. So instead, bishop e7, black just develops. You can play h3, back to go d4, and castles go d4. Still there's no takes on e4 because bishop d5, and now say knight a5, move back by bishop, c5, knight d2, and once again it's the same plan. We're just going to go rook e1, knight f1, knight g3, even g4 if you want to. So what else is there? Bishop e7. Okay, against bishop e7 you can play queen e2, or you can play rook e1 as well. This goes back into the main line, same idea again. It's very similar. You get c3 and d4. So you play h3, stopping the bishop g4s, and bring your knight all the way around. We can also play queen e2. This is called the Marshal Attack. Now b5, bishop e3, castles, c3, d5, d3, bishop e7, bishop g5, knight e5, bishop c2, e7 takes, knight 2, c5. By putting your queen on e2, you can get your rook onto d1. But I don't like this as much. I think, as you can see from these pawns, black's getting really nice central control and space advantage. So I prefer to just put my rook in e1 and continue the other plan. Okay. Castles. Also they can play bishop c5 here, which is similar to what we looked at before when the bishops were my bishop was on b5 and they hadn't played a6 yet. We can just play the same thing, c3, looking to play d4. And so they castle, we can just play. Actually, I got that wrong. You go rook e1 first, you need to make sure you protect this pawn. And now black will actually play b5 because they castle. You can play c3 threatening d4, and now b5 is not as good because we can go bishop c2 all in one move. So they like to play b5 immediately. Bishop b3, castles, and then c3, d6. So now you get d4. They're gonna try and get bishop g4 in at some point. So we can play d4. They can take bishop b4. Which might be a little bit annoying, so we just go h3, just keeping the same plan, not to confuse you guys. And bishop b6, d4, and now bishop might come to b7, trying to attack this pawn. And by put the bishop on outside this pawn chain, you can put a lot of pressure on d4. But by playing bishop b7, we now have a chance to play bishop g5 ourselves, and h6 and just bishop h4. It's really hard to break this pin without playing g5 and opening black's king. So black might stop that. They play something like h6. Then we have time to put our knight on d2. And go knight f1, or we can play bishop e3 first if you want to lose d4 pawn. So the knight takes d5, e4 and bishop d5, winning a knight. So now it's bishop e7, ready to take on e4. We can now go knight d2. Very similar to the variation we just looked at. We can drop a bishop back and then g4, knight f1, knight g3. And it's once again just like a really similar plan. Okay, so time to look at the Marshal Attack. So the b5, bishop b3. D6, c3. No, d6. Bishop b7 here. The Marshal Attack involves just d5, challenging the centre. Bishop e7. I'm going to play rook e1, protecting our pawn, castles, c3, and now d5 immediately. Normally black tends to go d6, this tends to be more popular with d6, and we've already been over this, so we just go h3 and d4 and get our knight around to kingside. But against d5, the Marshal Attack, normally white can win a pawn here. It's a little risky. He takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and now c6, d4, bishop d6, rook back to e1, queen h4, and you see black's compensation for the pawn. He's got bishop pointing towards king, and this bishop's coming in. The queen's already there. This knight could always come in. This rook's going to come over to just help control the e-file. And white's pieces are all a little uncoordinated. All these pieces are undeveloped. This bishop's offside. It needs to come to c2 possibly. So yeah, I don't like playing against this line. It's very, very aggressive for black, and they're obviously going to know what to do. Because no point, they're not going to play the Marshal and give up a pawn if they're not going to have a clear idea how to actually play the opening. So a good move to get you out of theory is just to play the anti-Marshal, where you just respond with d5 with d4. Now this move looks sort of like a more aggressive move. A lot of exchanges can happen, but it's actually really good. And the exchanges are not that complicated for white to think out. Obviously, black has to it's his moves. He has to make the concede in the center here. So you can either take this way, or knight takes. There's 3 options, and most of them it's very easy to respond with for white. For example, if d takes e4, attacking the knight, then obviously we're going to have to, because the knight's attacked, we're going to take here with our knight, attacking their knight, and they say if they take, we take. And I had a game, where was it? Can't remember where it was. I think it was in an English Congress. But in this position, I had a game like this, and so this pawn's being attacking the knight, so we're going to win the pawn on e5 and e4, and after queen takes d1, I play bishop takes d1, so we can win his pawn. And after my opponent played, I think, knight g4, I took on e4, and now I think they played rook d8, because I can't take, rook takes, it's going to be back rank mate. Have to be careful of that. So here I played knight d2, and now I am threatening to take on g4, and the knight's going to have to retreat. If he goes h5, I'm going to go h3. Nice to go back anyway, so knight back to h6, and now I can play moves like give bishop to b3 or bishop to f3, or just rook into d4. And also, after I move this knight out of the way, I can attack his knight on h6, and I'm just a pawn up, so this is really good for white. So they don't do that, and if they take with the if they take with the knight here, we can take with our pawn, and now we're already threatening to take on d5, and then after send bishop e6, knight d2, knight c5, and now we can either drop the bishop back or put it on knight on d4. So knight on d4. The idea of playing bishop c2 next move, and of course play f4. It's very similar to that of the closed Lopez, which he looked at as well, so we need to go into this in too much detail. And the main move is actually e takes d4, and now if white takes on d4, then they're going to take on e4. So what we would do first is we play e5 ourselves, attacking the knight. Knight comes to e4, and now we recapture with pawn takes d4, and now we can put our knight out on c3, attacking both here and here. So they put bishop e6, and now knight c3, and takes. We can just put bishop back to c2, queen d3, put pressure on black's king. So for example, let's see if they go b4 here, we can play queen up, takes, bishop c2, threatening checkmate on h7, g6. And now we want to stop knight going into b4, so we play that a3, now say rook b8 or something, h6, rook has to move, and now we're going to try continued attack. Something like, well, we can even just play bishop a4 here, this looks pretty good as well, or take on a6, we can play g3, h4, and then drop the bishop back and just take over these potentially weak squares around black's king, or we can just recapture on c3 as well and win back our pawn. So it's also a good way for white to play. That's the Marshal Attack. That's pretty much it on the Roy Lopez. I showed you all the sidelines on Roy Lopez, and if you had to learn, if you didn't have that much time and you still want to play with Roy Lopez, then a lot of the ideas are the same, which is great. So it means you'd have to learn as much. You've got to know the basic moves, and that'll get you into the middle game. But if you don't have that much time, I'd recommend you learn the d6, because it's the main line, and d5, the Marshal. You can play d4 here. And also I'd recommend you learn something against just f5, because this is also a pretty common move, and it's the one that is not similar to all the other Roy Lopez lines. All the other Roy Lopez lines, you just play c3 and d4 castles. This knight comes over to g3. It's all very it's all got the same ideas. So F5 would definitely be another one I'd learn well, because this is nothing like what we've just been looking at. It's all very different and pretty sharp, and yeah, it's vital you know all this. So, covered the Petrov and knight c6. So what happens if they play d6? So they play. Oh yeah, so there's a couple more moves to look at quickly. There's d6 here. There's also f5 and also d5. These are like Latvian and elephant gambits. So let's look at d5 quickly. This is not so critical. This is the elephant gambit, and it's actually pretty dangerous if you don't know what to do against it. But here you can just take, and then after e4, you go queen e2 is an important move, just pinning the pawn against the king. Knight f6, d3, and now you're going to play knight c3, you're going to take this pawn, and that's pretty much all you need to know really. You just got to make sure you don't move this knight. When they go e4, that's when it starts getting really dangerous. So the elephant gambit's hardly ever played. I wouldn't expect you to get that. The Latvian gambit's a little more popular. Against this you can just take on e5. Now immediately you're threatening queen h5 check. So there you go, queen f6, attacking knight, d4, d6, knight c4, takes, knight c3, attacking his pawn, queen g6, and now a really nice line here, just go f3, just put pressure on his pawn. They normally take, queen takes f3, knight c6, bishop d3, attacking the queen, that's queen g4, queen if you check, bishop b7, and white gets a really nice position, and that's why Latvian isn't very popular, especially at grandmaster level. So here you can just, you could try castles, but then black can swap off queens, pawn's weak on d4, but I'm not sure. I'll probably get away with this. I think this castle might be enough. I don't think you need the queens. Takes, knight takes. Now knight d5. Now you strike, hitting this pawn on c7, which is weak. And if the bishop tries to drop back, then we can get really quick development with our bishop, and try swing the rook over to e1. So here you can just play something like bishop e3, and knight might come to e6 to provide further defense, and you just put something like something like rook ae1. c6 can't be played because then there's knights attacking d6. We're already threatened to play bishop d4, and then there's a pin against black's king, and take on g7. And here, white has a really nice attack. He's got a great position. Black's pretty squashed in. So Latvian's not really, it's a very testing opening. And d6 is the last one we need to look at quickly. This is the Philidor. Against this you can play d4 takes, queen takes d4, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7, knight c3, castles, queen knight c6, and queen d2, a6, king b1. So that it's like in the Petrov, this king b1 move is always a useful move. Same in the Dragon, the Yugoslav attack. Now b5, bishop d3, similar to that Petrov variation where we're going to aim at h7, knight e5. And here you can just continue with trying to play f4 and then h3, g4, and really build a massive kingside attack. So yeah, Philidor, most players might play, they might not even take on d4, they could play something like this as well. Knight d7, knight c3, now knight f6. And this actually allows white to play one of my favourite gambits here, the Shirov gambit of g4. And this also can arrive from after e4 from the puck. Then you play d6, you can play d4, knight f6, attacking the pawn, you go knight c3. A lot of players will play e5 here, and then you defend the pawn knight f3, and now knight d7, and now g4, and this is exactly a transposition can't say it, transposes into the e5 one, the Philidor, and this is just a sheer off Gambit here. And a g4 is great. You know, if black doesn't take it, then he just allows you allows you to play g5. So most players will take on g4. And now you can play rook g1. Knight's being attacked. Now knight retreats. Bishop c4. So we get very quick development. Already we're threatening knight g5, attacking f7 pawn. So it might play something h6, and then we can take, and play bishop e3. Then we're going to go queen d3 and castle. So you play c6, something like this. Queen d3, b5. Bishop can even drop back here. We're also threatening here to play bishop takes f7 check. So they went a5 first, trying to play b5 and then a5, trying to trap the bishop. We can just take, check, queen takes, queen check, and now this is actually quite a tricky position for black to defend. King 7's probably the worst move you can play here because of knight h4, and we arrive at one of these squares with check. So king e8 is best, and now we can play knight h4, going into one of these squares. We could also castle next move, or queen 6 check, and so it's actually pretty difficult for black to defend against. If they go b5, also against a5 you can just play bishop b3 as well if you don't want to sacrifice the piece. This is also good. Just go bishop back to b3, and then say if they go a5, go a4, or just a3. You can play a3 here if you want. So if they go a4, then b4, something like this. And now this actually opens up this diagonal again. So I'll be tempted to sacrifice the bishop or play queen c4. Queen c4 is also tempting because now we're attacking f7, and now queen e7 has to be played, and we can take on c6, attacking the rook. Rook has to go to b8, and now this knight has complete freedom just to jump into c7 check. And the great thing about shove Gambit is, yeah, we give away a pawn, but this bishop's always tied down to defending the g7 pawn from this rook. And as soon as white gets castled as well, just when this rook comes into the game, all these pieces are working so well together. It's great coordination, and well, you know, it's called the Shirov Gambit because Shirov plays it, and he's Shirov. He's one of my favourite players, and he is so aggressive. He always comes up with some great lines in whenever he's playing. So if you are an aggressive player, then I'd definitely look at Shirov's games, and he has some pretty nice ideas against a lot of lines. He has a very nice idea against the Scandinavian, because most people, when you play against Scandinavian, it can be pretty hard to get an edge. But Shirov, he just launches the whole of his kingside pawns at them. So yeah, definitely take a look at that if you're an aggressive player. So we've covered everything now in the whole Royal Pairs. It took a while. I tried to go through it as quick as possible, especially through the not so popular moves, because hopefully you probably won't get them as much. You probably only get them online, but over the board you should just maybe get them once or twice. Like 1 out of every 10 games maybe, or 1 out of every 20 games even. I can't remember playing against those lines over in the tournament game. I always get a6 and either the Marshal or just a d6 line, the complete main line. But the great thing about the Royal Pairs is most of the lines are all very similar. So you got the same plans most of the time. Just going c3, h3, d4. You switch your knight all the way over to the king side, and you drop your light square bishop back to c2. So that does make it a lot easier to, if you can just remember that those plans and just get that move order right. So remembering to play h3 before going before going d4 to avoid any pins, then it makes it a lot easier to learn the Roy Lopez, and you can be ready to play it in your next tournament game. And just give it a try out online first, see how well you do, see what's going wrong, or if you just keep winning with it, because it is a very nice opening. So yeah, that's what I recommend against 1e5. I did this video because my friends did say he wanted to hear about what my recommendation was against it. I think he has a congress coming up this weekend, so he has enough time to hopefully learn the Roy Lopez, and then if he gets e5 in the tournament game, he might be able to use it then. But yeah, that's all for now, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.